Hey guys, Will here. So today I'm very excited to be checking out a wheel that I'm sure any Fanatec wheelbase owner would tell you they've been wishing Fanatec would make since pretty much forever. But that is not the full extent of the story with this wheel. It's also compatible with pretty much any other wheelbase that you can imagine. And on top of all of that, it's also about half or less than half the price of something like a Cube Controls CSX3. So today we're going to be taking a look at the Leoxz XF1 sport steering wheel in all its detail and figure out whether this is the wheel for you. Let's get started. Okay, so to start with here, firstly, a big thank you to Leoxz for sending across this wheel for us to check out today for review. Now, we will be cross-comparing this with some other wheels throughout today's process too, so it's important that you know that all the wheels and all the equipment that we're talking about today has all been sent to us under exactly the same conditions. No third party has any control over anything that we say here. It's all just purely our own thoughts and our own opinions. Now, if you do decide you want to pick up any of the gear that we've discussed or you've seen in today's video, we will have some affiliate links down in the description below. Those are an awesome way of helping support the channel at no additional cost to you. Now, we don't have any direct financial relationship with Leoxz at all. We do have a couple of reseller partners though that will be linked down in the description below. So with that out of the way, let's get stuck into the Leoxz XF1 sports steering wheel. So starting off with compatibility, this is a PC only steering wheel. So unfortunately, even if you do have a console compatible wheelbase like the one on the table here, you will be limited to PC with this particular steering wheel. Now, as you can see on the back of the wheel as it stands right now, we have a Fanatec style quick release. This is pretty much identical to what you would find on a genuine Fanatec wheel. You can see there side by side, not a whole lot of difference between the two. The only real difference being that, as you can see, this has a 70mm standard bolt pattern on the back of it, which means therefore that you can actually remove this quick release adapter and plug in something like a SimMagic quick release or a Mozza quick release, which looks pretty much exactly the same as this. They even have a Thrustmaster quick release, which you can bolt onto this guy too. Now, you've probably already noticed the USB cable. This can connect to your PC either via USB like you see here or via Bluetooth via this little antenna here. So it is connecting directly to your PC via Bluetooth. That means that if your motherboard doesn't have integrated Bluetooth, you will need to purchase a little Bluetooth dongle to get that connectivity up and running. But what it does do, which is really cool, is it actually delivers power to the wheel via the pin assembly in the back of the quick release. So regardless of the wheelbase that you have, provided that it is a wheelbase that delivers power directly to the wheel, so your SimMagic, your Mozza, your Fanatec, for example, then you won't actually need to have a cable connected to your PC, or you won't actually have to be tethered in any way at all to get this wheel up and running. And as you can see, we still have LED lights, we still have a dash and all of those things. So it is a very exciting wheel for a number of reasons. So now let's talk quickly about the pricing so you get the full context of exactly what we're looking at here. So the pricing for this particular model, the XF1 Sport, starts at €499.95. That price doesn't include any quick release adapters. So you're looking at between, what did I write down here? Between about 50 to 70 euro for the quick release adapter, depending on the one that you need for your particular wheelbase. So check the website or your local reseller, links down in the description below to find out exactly what you're going to be up for your particular scenario. That also only comes configured with the magnetic shifter paddles that you see here. So you then have the option to add the additional analog clutch paddles here. That will bring the price up to $539.95. And then if you want to have these additional analog paddles that you see on the top here, that will bring the price up to $579.95. So the configuration as you see it here with the quick release adapter on it too, you'd be looking at a touch over 600 euro, 630 euro or so. So the price does add up quickly. But that said, if you're looking at something like a Cube Controls CSX3 wheel, you're looking at 1,270 euro just for the wheel. And then if we were to continue with the Fanatec wheelbase scenario, because Fanatec actually locks out their force feedback entirely if you don't have a Fanatec quick release actually attached to the stem here, you'd be looking at another 199.95 euro just to actually get this wheel working on a Fanatec wheelbase. You would still also have to be tethered with the USB cable too. This particular wheel doesn't operate wirelessly with the display. But yeah, I think you guys are getting the message. A wheel like this is going to set you back about 1,500 euro to get it up and running on a Fanatec wheelbase officially. There are a couple of third-party emulator type adapters which are available a little bit cheaper. You guys can do your own research there. Sim Racing Bay, I believe, sell one, although I've never actually personally tested it out, so I can't vouch for it. But yeah, if you compare 1,500 euro to around 630 euro that it's going to cost you to get this up and running in pretty much a similar kind of configuration to what we have over here, minus the tether, of course, remembering that this can connect via Bluetooth, then you can see why this is a wheel that I am particularly excited about. Now, it's important that you guys are aware that there are a couple of other variations of this wheel available too. So if you don't want the Bluetooth connectivity, if you're happy to connect just via USB, then there is a USB only version available, which comes in at €399.95, which incidentally is pretty much exactly the same price as what you'd be paying for something like a Fanatec Formula V2.5 wheel. Remembering again, you will need to purchase the Fanatec quick release on top of that, which is an extra 60 or so euro. So just be aware of that. Now, there is also a pro version of this wheel available. Unfortunately, I don't have one here in the studio to check out. I kind of wish I did, because it may actually be the one that I would pick. Now, the differences there are, and there's actually a full comparison list available on their website. I suggest you check that out so you can see exactly what the differences are between the variants available. But to give you the short form answer, you get a forged carbon fiber front plate. You get RGB controllable LEDs as opposed to the fixed colors that you see on this model. You don't get the Bluetooth connectivity, but the main advantage there is that you get a display which is actually configurable via SIM hub, rather than having the fixed displays that you have on this particular wheel that we're looking at in just a minute. So what that means is that you can completely customize the display to make it show pretty much anything that you want. So if that's something that's important to you, then definitely check out that Pro model. The disadvantage there though is that SIM hub is a lot more complex to set up with dashes. It can be a little bit more clunky and cumbersome, although it has come in leaps and bounds over the last year or so with some custom profiles which are cooked into the software nowadays. So it is very good, but as you'll see as we start to unpack this wheel in a bit more detail, the way they've set this guy up in relation to the dashes is actually really easy to operate, and actually does give you an awful lot of functionality as well. So I've actually been really impressed with this in the time that we've been using it. So let's quickly run you through some of the key specs now, and then we'll take you through the build quality in more detail before we get up and do some driving and take a look at how the dashes all function. So we're looking at a 275mm diameter wheel here, roughly the same kind of diameter as what you get with the Fanatec Formula style wheels for reference. Now, I do find it to be a little bit on the narrow side. You do adjust and adapt to using a narrow wheel, but a smaller diameter wheel has a lesser dampening effect on the force feedback. So it means that if you're running a less powerful direct drive wheelbase, like something like a CSL DD, for example, then you're gonna feel a lot more sensation through the wheel than what you would with a heavier and much larger wheel. The wheel is relatively lightweight as well, so that is a good thing, but you will find that at 275mm, it is more suited to that more kind of Formula style driving. If you're driving a lot of GT3, GT4, you may actually decide that you want to have something a little bit larger in terms of diameter. I actually hope that they do release another version of this wheel that does have that larger diameter, because I just think that will be a little bit more versatile. And again, your personal preference may vary there, but for me, I generally like between about 280, 290mm for Formula style. GT3, I actually prefer 290 to 300, and then anything over that I'd be using for, more of a street style car or something that has a round wheel rally or drifting or something like that. Now, in terms of inputs and outputs, starting with the outputs, we've got a 4.3-inch IPS display here. That is a resolution of 480 by 272, and it also has a 60 Hertz refresh rate too. So it does have a nice smooth look to it as it's displaying your telemetry, and we'll unpack that in more detail as we get on in today's video too. So then we also have an array of 22 LEDs on the wheel, 12 LEDs across here for your RPM strip. Then we've got 4 LEDs which are used to indicate status, so ABS or traction control kicking in, and then we also have some flag LEDs on the sides here too. And we'll take you through exactly what you can and can't do with all of these features when we get up and driving a little later on. That is everything in terms of outputs. And then input wise, we've got 15 push buttons, a 5-way little hat switch here. So that gives you up, down, left, right, and push buttons. We've got 3 clickable rotary encoders, and then also 2 thumb encoders here as well, which I'm really happy to see on a wheel at this price point. And then of course, as we saw earlier, if you flip the wheel around, you've got your 2 shifter paddles, which are included at the base price, and the option to add your analog clutch paddles and the analog option paddles at the top, should you wish to add those as well. So let's take a more detailed look now at the build quality, because I was honestly expecting at this price point there'd be a lot of corners cut. And look, to be honest with you guys, there really isn't. If we compare across to something like a Cube Control CSX3, remembering again how much more this costs, you can obviously see at face value this wheel looks a lot more flashy. But look, in terms of the things that are important, and this was kind of similar to what we saw with the Cube Control's F Core wheel a couple of days ago when we reviewed that. The core functionality, the things you actually need to, have good ergonomics, good rigidity, all those details aren't really missing from this wheel either. So we can see a 5mm thick carbon fiber plate across the front here. The wheel is very stiff as well. There's a little tiny bit of twist there compared to the F Core that we reviewed the other day, but certainly nothing that I would say is excessive, and in fact less twist than we have on some wheels that cost a lot more than this one does. Any sort of open design wheel at the bottom here does tend to lend itself to a little bit of flex here, but if we have a look at the side here, you can see it is a unibody design, so you have that one piece of 5mm thick genuine carbon fiber which extends all the way throughout underneath the grips as well. And that's what gives it its overall rigidity. These polyurethane grips do also have a really nice feel to them, a good amount of squish there, and they're not quite as smooth as what we have on the more expensive CSX3 wheel, but they're not that horrible, sticky, tacky material that we see on some other wheels. And again, that was something that I pointed out with the F-Core wheel just a couple of days ago. I'm not a big fan of that sticky feeling sort of material that picks up dirt and debris, dead skin cells and things like that. This has got a good squish to it, feels nice and smooth, but just doesn't have that sticky feel to it. So again, a really nice choice of material there as well. And flipping the wheel around again, you can see it is also a CNC machined aluminium frame here too, which is something that we don't often see on a wheel at around this kind of price point. If we compare that again to a Fanatec wheel, all around the back here is all completely plastic. There is a metal frame internally which gives it its rigidity. But even in saying that, when you twist these Fanatec wheels, sometimes, not all of them, but a lot of the ones that I have here do actually give you a plastic creaking sound as you kind of try to twist them. So overall, the rigidity is very good with these wheels, but it just doesn't have quite that same premium feel to it like what you're getting here. Now, another thing that stands out to me at this wheel, again, compared to other wheels at around this kind of price point, is the quality of the touch points. Now, what I mean by that is the quality of the feeling of the switches, the rotary encoders. These are all actually metal, as opposed to the plastic that you often do see at wheels around this price point, including the F-Core that, again, we looked at the other day. But these are beautiful anodized aluminium. The rotary encoders for the thumbs are relatively soft. They don't quite have the same amount of resistance to them, or probably I'd say about half the resistance as we get on something like a CSX3. Now that is a personal preference thing. Some people prefer to have a smoother and less, I guess, less detailed click in each position. It is something that you could bump unintentionally when you're driving, particularly if you have gloves on. Whereas again, comparing to the CSX3, that is not something that you're going to be doing. But again, if we were to compare it to something like a Fanatec, those are a little bit softer, not a whole lot, but a little bit more easily bumped than something like this is. So maybe I would like to see a little bit more resistance there for my own personal taste, but again, that's going to be completely up to you. The rotary encoders on the front though do have nice, clearly defined detents to them. They are a little bit softer than what we have over here. A little bit more than half the resistance, I would say. But again, they got a good quality feel to them, and you do have that push button functionality there too. Now the buttons themselves, those are plastic. You can see I've actually already populated this wheel with some stickers that they include on the sticker sheets, as you see here. Nice high quality stickers as well, nice and easy to install, no issues at all there. And there is a decent variation, should flip that around the right way for you guys. There is a decent amount of labeling available there, including some stickers which you can actually stick on the face of these rotary encoders, but I prefer to run these naked simply because when I have letters on there that are off center, when you rotate the button, it just triggers my OCD, so I left those off, but you can configure it however you like with regards to that. But yeah, the buttons themselves have a good click to them. Actually very similar in feel to what we have on the much more expensive CSX3 as a reference point. So yeah, I'd struggle to feel a mechanical difference between them. They don't have that kind of initial squish to them like what you get on some buttons. It is very much a sort of snap on and snap off affair. Now the shifters as well, honestly, they're really, really good. You can see they are actually metal cages here as opposed to the plastic ones that we saw on the Cube Controls F-Core recently. Metal cages here and arms for the analog paddles too, and 3mm thick carbon fiber for these paddles. Now I have complained about 3mm thick carbon fiber in the past on some wheels because it did have a little bit of flex. Because these paddles are relatively short, I'm not actually noticing any flex there at all with the kind of strength that I would be pulling those paddles. You may vary there. One weak spot I would say is just where it bolts on here. There is a chance that it could shear off across there. I would prefer to see 5mm thick carbon fiber used universally on paddle shifters. I just think that it's a better choice and a lot less prone to becoming damaged. But having said that, these have all got a really good feel to them. One thing I will mention though, adjustability isn't fantastic here. You can see there are some little notches here that are about 8mm wide to allow you to slide in and out those paddles, but they are quite cramped. I don't have the biggest hands in the world. I've got quite girly hands, and you can see here when I do hold the wheel, it is quite cramped. It's not easy for me to sort of feel where I want my hands to be. And yeah, those shifters I would actually prefer to be a little bit more angled out and a little bit further away if I had the option. I can definitely drive with it, it's not a problem, but yeah, more adjustability would definitely be an improvement for somebody like me, but I wouldn't want to pay more for that privilege. And I think that's really, I guess, the point that I'm trying to make here is that the corners that they've cut, and there are some obvious ones, are all things that's, you know, they do have an impact on the driving experience, but whether or not they're things that you would want to pay more to have the privilege of is really up to you to decide, because obviously as you add more things, the price continues to go up until you reach the point where you're paying more than twice as much for something like this. Now, while we're still on the subject of build quality here, another thing that I do want to point out is that in my experience, they have been pretty good at listening to customer feedback too. Now, when they originally reached out to us to do a review of these wheels quite some time ago now, it's been a long time that we've been getting to this one, they sent us this wheel originally. Now, one of the complaints that I had about this one is you can see it's got a little USB-C connection down the bottom here to tether it to your PC if you are running in wired mode. And it came with this very flimsy little coiled cable with the obviously the USB-C connection on one end. So you'd plug that in like so, and then you can just see how flimsy and cheap feeling this cable was. My concern was that this would break off very easily and, you know, not only obviously damage the cable, but potentially damage the connector as well. So it actually wasn't long after they sent us this original wheel that they got back in touch and said, hey, we want to send you an updated model with a different connector there just to do away with any potential for failure from that weak connection. So what they're doing now is including a much thicker coiled cable, which I'm happy about, but it's also got a really nice high quality connection on the end here too. And you can see all I had to do there was just pull the collar. It's almost like a quick release, in fact. So you just pull the collar and pop it on or off the little connector on there. So again, just everywhere you look on this for the price, the quality, I've got to say, is absolutely exceptional. So let me quickly run you through now exactly how we swap over those quick releases, remembering again that we do have a couple of different options available. And then we'll get it mounted up on the rig, show you how to actually get it running with a Fanatec base, as well as what the driving experience is like. Okay, so we can kill two birds with one stone here. Have a look at the internal build quality, as well as how the structure actually works and how we bolt these different quick releases to the wheel itself. So starting off with internal build quality, absolutely no issues at all that I see here. This is the V1 wheel, as you can tell by the USB-C connection here. But yeah, one of the things I really like here is that this is their own custom PCB design, and there aren't any fly leads sort of floating around inside the wheel at all. There aren't any wires hanging off this board other than just the ribbon cable going through to the display module itself. So even the shifters, if we have a look here, you can see all we have is just these little magnetic posts. And in a very similar way to what we have on the Acertec Forte wheel that we reviewed just recently here, we've got little Hall effect sensors dotted around here on the PCB. You can see one there, and there. And what those do is they just measure the proximity of the magnet to the sensor. So in the case of the shifter panels, that's a digital output. In the case of the analog panels, it can also be used as a digital output, so on or off, or also a varying percentage between 0 and 100% for an analog access. So very, very simple design internally. This little guy up here, if you're wondering, is the Bluetooth antenna. And yeah, I'm impressed with what I can see here. This is a good way also to illustrate that 5mm thick carbon fiber faceplate. And even when I don't have the back shell on it, it is still relatively rigid. There's a little bit of twist there, but that doesn't really matter. Obviously, we're only interested in the final structure. But what happens here is the back shell, this CNC machined aluminum piece, then bolts onto the back of the wheel. And one thing you might notice on the frame here is that only every second hole is threaded. And what that's going to allow us to do is bolt the Thrustmaster and Fanatec ones in from the back, so the bolts are going to go in through the back. In the case of the Mozza and SimMagic ones, you can see these actually mount with the bolts coming in from the front. So if you do happen to have multiple wheelbases that you want to use this wheel on, you can swap between Fanatec and Thrustmaster relatively easily. But if you wanted to go between, say, Mozza and SimMagic, or Mozza and something else, or SimMagic and something else, then you are going to have to disassemble the back of the wheel. But I don't see too many people needing to do that. One thing I do notice is there's not a lot of structure in here in terms of where the quick release actually mounts to the aluminium. You can see it does flare out a little bit. So we've got a 3mm thick flare in the steel, but it will be interesting to see whether there's any flex in the quick release itself once it's mounted up on the wheelbase in just a minute. Remembering again that the Fanatec wheelbases do have quite a bit of flex inherent in the actual quick release mechanism itself. So whether or not it's noticeable on top of that is something that we'll have a look at in just a minute. But yeah, look, in terms of the internal build quality and structure and everything, really see no problems at all. And again, for the price point, I would go as far as to say I'm actually really impressed. So in terms of wiring, all of these quick releases just have a little fly lead like this. That just plugs into the little connector on the board. And that is essentially what gives us our power through to the wheel. Remembering again that we will need to connect in via USB or via Bluetooth to actually get the data across to the wheel. So we're not passing the data through the proprietary protocol. The way they've made these work universally with any wheelbase is by obviously having that direct connection to PC, either wirelessly or via the USB connection. Okay, so we've got our Fanatec GT Pro here in PC mode. We've got our Leoxz wheel. Let's plug this guy in and show you exactly how this works. So we're going to push it on. You can see straight away we get a splash screen on the display. And you'll notice on the PC here, I've got the Fanatec wheel property page open so you guys can see exactly how this works. So it's actually detecting it as a Club Sport Formula wheel, which is interesting because there's a emulator circuit inside the hub, I believe, that actually tricks the wheelbase into thinking that there's a wheel connected. Now that's important because if you don't have a genuine Fanatec wheel or a Podium Hub Universal Hub or something like that connected to the wheelbase, then it doesn't detect that there's a wheel present and it doesn't actually give you any force feedback. So that's the reason why this has to happen this way. Now, if we go back out here, you'll see we've got SimHub open with the Leoxz SimBridge software installed. So that's just a plugin which basically sits inside SimHub. And we've also got the wheel connected via Bluetooth. So to do that, it's literally just connecting it, assuming that your PC has Bluetooth connectivity. If not, you can just buy a dongle off eBay or Amazon or something like that. But all we need to do is just bring up the Bluetooth dialog, and you can see inside the Windows Bluetooth properties page that the wheel is connected here. Obviously it won't connect automatically the first time. You'll just need to open up and go to add device and it'll show up there in the list and you just add it as you would any other Bluetooth device. So we're going to exit out of that now. And this is the Leoxz SimBridge plugin. So let's just quickly run you through exactly what is available here. It just allows you to configure various settings and whatnot. So you can see we've got our paddles, both our analog paddles down the bottom and our analog paddles at the top. All the buttons show up, rotary encoders do their thing as well. All pretty self-explanatory stuff. You can see up the top here, it says Bluetooth connected and adapter available. So you obviously just need to make sure you have that ticked so that it can connect via Bluetooth. Now, one thing I should mention here as well is that SimHub actually runs at 10 Hertz by default. You have to buy the license for it to actually run above that. So if you want to take advantage of the full 60 Hertz refresh rate available on the screen and get 60 frames per second, you will need to license your copy of SimHub. I suggest that anybody does that that's using SimHub anyway. It's an absolutely fantastic piece of software and well worth the donations. So whatever the guy who actually makes this software, he is very much deserving of that support. So definitely go ahead and do that. Then on the right-hand side here, we've got a couple of things here which we can use to edit the default profile, which is loaded in as part of this plugin. One of the things I really like about this is the fact that with this plugin, everything just works straight out of the box. I did have to do a firmware update, which caused me a little bit of drama. The first time I flashed it, the screen stopped working. I had to flash it a second time and then it was all fine. But once we got that all sorted out, absolutely no issues. And I think probably the only reason why I had that issue is that actually sent me this wheel quite a while ago. And there's been a couple of firmware update revisions since we received the wheel. So the firmware just didn't match the latest version of the software that we downloaded and installed. So I'm sure you guys shouldn't have too many issues there. So we'll come back to these LEDs and show you how they work in just a minute. We'll just quickly go across to the settings page too. You can see this is where we do our firmware update. And really it's as simple as that. SimHub software is going to be responsible for controlling all the LEDs, as well as bringing the telemetry in from the game and sending it via Bluetooth to the display here, doing away with the need for any physical connection between the PC and the wheel, which is really, really cool. And obviously the power is coming to the wheel via the connections on the wheelbase, just like it would with a Fanatec wheel. So let's take a quick look at how these LEDs operate too. So we're going to go into edit profile and just run some test data here for you guys so we can see how it all works. Now it's important to note that the RPM gauge here isn't RGB, so it isn't addressable. You can't actually change the color, but you can see as we accelerate or decelerate, those LEDs are going to increase and decrease. Pretty self-explanatory stuff there. We'll switch off that test data and then we'll go into the status LEDs. Open up test data again. So say for example, ABS kicks in and you want to have a visual representation of that on the wheel. That is what it would look like. That light there would light up to let you know that that was happening. Traction control kicking in, likewise on the right-hand side. And then we also have lights for DRS here too. So say for example, you've just entered the DRS zone, you want a visual representation of that, that would look like this. So you've got the two green lights down the bottom. And then when you activate your DRS, you can see they go red. Like so. So pretty handy stuff to have on the wheel. A pretty common feature these days on more high-end wheels, but really great to see it available on a wheel at this price point that's compatible with pretty much any wheelbase. So lastly, just a quick look at how the flag LEDs work too. Black flag will look something like that. white flag like that, green flag, blue flag, and you guessed it, yellow flag. Okay, so being in the pits right now, we actually have a pit dedicated screen that's loaded up on the dash. So let's just head out of the pits quickly. We'll pull up somewhere off the racing line so we don't cause any drama. And I'll show you how all this works. You can see at the moment there was actually a status indicator. I didn't actually catch what that was. I think it might have been a car on the left, maybe. Might have been telling me. There's our RPMs, and you can see as soon as I got out of the pits there, it's gone across to the telemetry display. So let's actually get off the racing line here. See, white flag popped up as well. So let's just pull off over the edge here and run you through a couple of quick things. So there's 16 different dashes that we can choose from. Remembering again that we can't actually customize the dashes on this particular model, but the USB models, you can actually make your own dashes and run them through SimHub or use other third-party dashes. So you've got two little buttons down the bottom here. The one on the left allows you to quickly change between dashes. And as you can see here, there's quite a bit of information available on each one. So just to give you an idea of what we have here, let's just quickly go through them all. So there's everything from what you would expect to see in like a LMP car to GT3, all the way through to Formula style cars as well. We saw earlier on with the tire temperatures, ERS and DRS. There we go, there's a good one for F1. You can see the ERS deployment bar down the bottom there. A bit more information on that one as well. It's a pretty default kind of street car looking one as well. Just go across back into neutral so you can see the revs go up there. So it seems to be a pretty decent selection of different screens here. I like the Porsche replica dash. That's my favorite one. It kind of gives me everything that I want there. But that's how you tab through the dashes very easily. Now, to make adjustments to things like the clutch bite point, brightness, and all those things, we push on the right-hand button. And this is really cool. So we push in here, LED brightness adjustable from 10 all the way down to 0. So if we start with 0, they're off completely. Pretty dim all the way through to, as I always say, thermonuclear bright. That is more bright than I want it. So I'm going to set it back down to about 2, I think. That's pretty good for me. And then we go to the next page. That's our clutch paddle mode. So this allows us to choose between individually mappable axes or clutch bite point mode, and that works just like any other bite point clutch. So if you're not familiar, basically what happens is you release one hand, it takes you to the adjusted bite point, and then you release the second hand and it gets the car underway without any wheel spin. And there's a separate adjustment for that, which we'll get to in just a moment. So next one allows you to change the adjustment of the optional paddles at the top. So at the moment you can see they're individually mappable axes. If we turn the knob in the middle again, that changes it across to be a mappable button, so operating digitally rather than in an analog fashion. If we press again, that gives us the adjustment for our bite point. So we'd probably want to have that set to around about 70%. That suits the majority of cars that I drive, but obviously you're going to fine tune this to the car that you want. So it's really cool here that you can make these adjustments on the fly without having to Alt-Tab and make adjustments in software. I really do like this implementation. And I really like the fact that the dashes are all just there, they're integrated, they just work straight out of the box. There's no faffing around and getting things working. It's really, really easy to just get up and running and enjoy driving without all the hassle that's often associated with some of the more high-end wheels that we've tested over the years. Now, another thing to just quickly mention here as well while we're going through these settings, it is important to understand if you are running a Fanatec wheelbase, this doesn't give you access to the Fanatec tuning menu like you get on a natively supported Fanatec wheel. So you're not going to be able to switch between profiles or make those adjustments to the force feedback characteristics like you can on a genuine Fanatec wheel. So just be aware of that. But I think that covers pretty much everything we need to in terms of the software. As you can see, it's pretty clean and straightforward. Let's get into some driving now, and then we'll wrap things up with our final conclusions. So I've spent a decent chunk of time now familiarizing myself with this wheel and really getting to know all the nuances that come with using a wheel like this. And I gotta say, overall, I'm left with a really positive impression. One thing I will say is that the wheel did feel quite cramped for me at first compared to the wheels that I'm used to driving with. I don't have the biggest hands in the world by any means, and I think if you did have really big chunky fingers, particularly thumbs, you may struggle with this wheel. The openings around the thumbs are quite narrow, and it is quite easy to kind of get a little bit tangled up when you're turning past about 180 degrees. So just be mindful of that. But having said that, ergonomically, the wheel is actually really, really good. All the buttons are very nice and easy to reach, easy to feel where you are located on the wheel as well, so you don't have to take your eyes off the road. Particularly if you're in VR as well, you don't really have to kind of, you know, reorient yourself on the wheel. You can just kind of feel where everything is and push the buttons very easily. The one thing that I did struggle with for an hour or so was the shifters just being so close to the rim itself. You can't actually space them out at all. But yeah, just felt a little bit cramped for my hands, and if you've got big hands, you may find that issue as well. But look, overall, the feeling of the wheel, the balance of the wheel, the weight of the wheel all feels really fantastic, particularly driving Formula style cars. I spent quite a lot of time in the F3 in iRacing, and I really felt like I was getting a good sensation of what the car was doing underneath me. And I was driving with the Fanatec GT DD Pro, which doesn't generally have as much detail, at least with the way I have this wheelbase tuned compared to my SimiCube 2 Ultimate that I drive with daily. So I did appreciate the lightness of this wheel, the balance of this wheel, and I think what the diameter of the wheel brought to the table as well, just in really feeling that fine detail in what the car's doing. So I think that this wheel is very well matched to wheelbases that are maybe, you know, I mean, it works with everything, of course, but particularly if you've got a wheelbase that's under 10 Newton meters, I think you're really going to appreciate the lightness and small diameter of this wheel. I think that's really where it's going to be, you know, come into its element, I guess. Another thing that I appreciated in the wheel as well was the lack of flex or creaking. Absolutely no creaking, being that there's not any plastic in the actual housing of the wheel. So that was all absolutely fine. There is a little tiny bit of twist in the bottom of the grips. That's pretty typical of a open bottom wheel like this one. We've tested wheels that are far more expensive than this that have had quite significantly more flex than this wheel does. So definitely nothing to complain about there. Another thing that I did actually notice was that the Fanatec quick release mechanism actually has less play in it, if any play at all, than every single one of my Fanatec wheels that I've tested with this particular base. And I've got probably about 25 Fanatec wheels. So I feel like they've done a better job than Fanatec have themselves with this quick release. It doesn't have the provision for the locking screw in the bottom like the genuine Fanatec ones does, but the tolerance feels really good, at least with the stem that we have here. Now, there are, of course, manufacturing tolerances at play there, so your experience may vary, but I was very, very happy with how this wheel, pleasantly surprised with how this wheel felt on the GT DD Pro. Now, I spent quite a lot of time switching between gloves and no gloves, and I did really appreciate without gloves just how nice these grips feel. I feel like they've really nailed that sensation of texture and a little bit of grippiness in the wheel itself. It's not completely smooth to the point of being slippery like some other wheels we've tested, but it doesn't have that sticky, tacky feeling to it. It doesn't pick up dirt and debris. So really, really am a big fan of the material that they've used here. And again, I'm surprised at the quality for the price compared to a lot of other wheels that we've tested once again. Another thing I did notice on the negative side with gloves on in particular though, is that these rotary encoders are definitely on the light side for my personal preference. I did find that a couple of times I was, or actually more than a couple of times, I was flicking the buttons and finding that I was making adjustments beyond what I'd intended. I feel like the detents in the thumb encoders and the rotary encoders on the front just aren't quite stiff enough that you get a good sensation through gloves. Although with bare hands, I had absolutely no issue whatsoever. Absolutely no issues to speak of whatsoever with any of the other push buttons. The little 5-way switch is a little bit on the loose side, does feel a little bit cheap compared to a lot of the more expensive wheels that we've tested. But I think above all, where this wheel has really shone through for me is I was expecting, being a kind of bootleg product that is, you know, working around Fanatec's lockout system and, you know, allowing you to achieve what you can achieve with this wheel with having a full display on the wheel, being powered by the wheelbase and, you know, connecting via Bluetooth through to the PC, so not having to be tethered in any fashion. I expected it to be a little bit of a hassle. I expected things to go wrong. I expected to have to stuff around with software a lot to get things up and running. And look, honestly, that just wasn't the case. Other than just having to stuff around a little bit with firmware updates, which again was probably due to the fact that the firmware on the wheel was quite out of date by the time we actually got around to testing it. Yeah, absolutely no issues whatsoever. Everything just plugged in, everything connected, and it just worked completely out of the box. And I think that there's a lot to be said for that. It's certainly not something that should be understated. A lot of people don't have hours and hours of time to stuff around, get things working. They might have a quick half hour or an hour after work to jump in the rig before dinner, and they don't want to be messing around trying to get things working. So I think that is a really important aspect and one that they've absolutely nailed with this wheel. Now, we mentioned earlier in the review that there is the option for the Pro version, which allows you to run custom dashes with SimHub. Look, honestly, I think unless you want to customize and configure your own stuff, this pretty much has you covered. And I really do appreciate the ease of use here. I think that, there's a lot to be said for that. I really didn't feel like there was anything lacking there whatsoever. With SimHub licensed running at the 60 frames per second, there was no issues with latency or lag or anything like that either. And yeah, again, it just kind of all worked. The text is easy to read. The resolution is absolutely fine for a screen of this size. The viewing angles and everything are fine. The contrast ratio is absolutely fine as well. And yeah, there's really nothing to nitpick about the dash. I like the way you're able to adjust the clutch bite points, brightness, and all those things on the wheel itself as well, not having to go across into software to make those adjustments. It would be absolutely amazing if you were able to adjust your Fanatec wheelbase settings from the wheel itself. I don't see that as ever being something that's likely to happen. I'm sure that's all stuff that Fanatec are very, very keen to not let other third parties get access to. But yeah, look, when you consider the versatility of this wheel and the fact that it can work with pretty much any wheelbase, they already have quick release adapters available for pretty much everything as well. It's just such an easy product to get up and running and use that, yeah, I see absolutely no issues whatsoever recommending it. Particularly, I think if you've got a Fanatec wheelbase and you're really longing for a wheel that has an integrated dash in it, there are options to, mount phones and things like that as a dash if you want to, but this is a really, really clean and simple solution to a problem that people have been wanting a solution for a very, very long time. And lastly, I also just want to comment on the visual design of this wheel. One of the things I've actually grown to really appreciate about this wheel is, I guess, the lack of overall refinedness in the design. I actually really love the way they've kind of cut out the DDU shape and embossed it or engraved it or CNC milled it out of the carbon fiber faceplate rather than having a plastic shroud that looks like a toy. This is the kind of stuff you actually do find on a real life race car wheel. And although maybe it doesn't look quite as flashy as some of the other wheels that we've tested, it actually does have a really authentic overall look and feel to it, and I really appreciated that too. So yeah, look, at the end of the day, this has positively surprised me. I really wasn't sure what to expect with this wheel, but I really don't have a whole lot to nitpick about it. I think that for what it's aiming to achieve, it does a really great job. Just be aware that if you do have large hands, you may struggle to get along with it, but otherwise, absolutely no issues whatsoever in recommending this wheel. I think it does a really fantastic job. So I hope that today's video has helped you out. Leave a thumbs up if it has. If you do want to pick one of these up, there will be some links down in the description below there, and also way of helping support the channel at no additional cost to you, and we really do appreciate your support there greatly. But above all, thank you very much for watching as always, and we'll see you again very soon. Bye.